I live right next to a Navarro reservation and have made many friends of the people there my age. We like to hang out, play video games, and just be normal teens. I walk over a lot since my best friend lives a little less than a mile away from me. This isn't a long trek, and usually only takes me about 25 to 30 minutes. I've made this trip dozens of times, and have grown very comfortable with it. I know the people along the way, so I'm not scared or on edge. There's a patch of the forest, however, about midway there. It's a little unnerving sometimes. There's always that feeling of being watched. This was a regular occurrence for me, so I tried to ignore it and shake it off as my mind played tricks on me. This day I spent more time at my friend's house than I meant to, and when I left it was already getting dark. I reached the stretch of forest right as the sun disappeared from the sky. I shivered a little as I readied myself to begin the long journey through. I was 10 steps in when I heard a branch snap. The one that screams that there's definitely someone or something there with you. I froze, not sure what I should do next. Should I run? Should I turn around and book it back to my friend's house? I didn't know the best option in this situation. I whispered, "Hello?" Hearing my voice crack as the words fell from my lips. I don't know why I even opened my mouth, but it was out there, so I listened for any reply. My heart sank when the voice came back, in the sound of my voice. "Hello?" I started to breathe too fast. My heart pounded against my chest. I felt like I might faint. "Hello?" My voice came again, but not from my mouth. I wanted to run, but my feet felt cemented to the ground. I couldn't scream, I couldn't reply, as my voice echoed over and over from a short distance away. I couldn't pinpoint exactly where it was coming from. It sounded like it was surrounding me. "Hello?" It repeated. "Please stop it." I finally managed to tear from my lips. Everything went silent. For a long minute, nothing happened. The air grew stale, and I realized for the first time that there was no typical forest sounds. There was no bugs, no frogs or crickets. Nothing. I stood there, terrified, waiting to see what would happen next. "Please stop it." It mimicked back. I had enough, and was willing my heavy legs to move. Before I could take a step, I heard rustling in the bushes, 20 feet to my left. I watched in horror as a deer head with huge antlers protruded from the bush. As it came further out and stood up on twos, I took off. I flew out of those woods and all the way home in record time. I said nothing to my mom when I got there. I just went up to my room, laid down and thought about what happened. My mother came in at some point and asked me if everything was alright. I replied yes. I was just tired. I don't know why I didn't tell her. I guess I might have been afraid of how she would react. I called my friend and told him everything. He freaked out and told me that no matter what happened that night, to not reply or look out my window. This terrified me even more. He said to call him in the next morning, and he would explain more, and that he had to speak to his grandfather as soon as possible. That night I didn't sleep at all. I stayed awake listening to every little sound the night brought. Around 3 a.m., just as I was about to drift off, the air changed. The night sounds quieted. I felt my heart begin to pound. I lay there and waited, pulling the covers up from my head like a child, far too scared to move. It came after a long moment. "Hello?" I cried. It was all I could do. "Hello? Please stop it." It mocked what I had said in the woods again. It was terrifying enough when it copied what I said, but then it did something new. It called my name. "Alex." My mother's voice. "Come here." "Hello? Please stop it." My voice again. For the rest of the night, the creature outside of my window called my name in my mother's voice and repeated what I said in the woods over and over. In the morning, when the sun broke through the dark, it finally stopped. I fell into a fitful sleep. I woke up around 12 to my friend calling me to tell me he had spoken to his grandfather and that he could explain everything that happened to me. He said there was a creature called the Yi Naldalushi. He goes on all fours, or a Skinwalker. He explained that it was an evil witch that used dark magic to transform into an animal with the attributes it required, and that it had caught my scent and knew me now. I was also given a warning that since it knew me, it would always follow me, that I would always have to be careful. Last night I heard scratching on my window, then a low hum. The creature began saying my name again, but also adding in things I hadn't said in my mother's voice. At one point it started calling my name, but drawing it out really far like, "Oh, Alex." It tried to get me to come outside, or to open the door and let it in my house. This went on all night. At this point, I feel like I'm going crazy. I don't know what to do. Is it seriously going to stalk the shadows around me for the rest of my life? I don't think I could take that. This is a tale that I experienced. A tale that has left me extremely depressed and paranoid for most of my life. It traumatized me, and it cost me the life of my dear brother Fernando. This is a tale about La Llorona, the weeping woman. A spirit that wanders for eternity, searching for her children that she drowned. This tragic event occurred near Venezuela many years ago. It was dark, and it was raining hard. Me and my brother were lying awake in our beds. We couldn't sleep because of the constant hail of rain that was cascading onto our roof and window. It was extremely hard to ignore. After a while, my brother said he heard something, and he sat up. I sat up too, just to see what was bothering him. That's when I heard it too. The soft cries of a woman. My brother wanted to go see what was going on. He wanted to help the woman, but I disagreed. I was smaller than my brother, and he was better at working in the fields than me. I was small, but usually that didn't slow me down. But something about those cries didn't sound right. I didn't want to go, but my brother tossed me my pants and said, "Don't be a pussy, come on, let's go check it out." I knew my brother would just pester me more, so I put on my pants and my shoes, and I grabbed my sweater, putting it on. I was ready. But then I saw my brother pull out a pistol. He put it behind his pants, underneath his shirt. I was looking at him with a concerned stare, but he just asked me if I had a problem. I just looked away, and we quietly stepped outside. We walked along the field, until we saw her, the source of the quiet sobbing. She wore a white gown, and she had beautiful long black hair. My brother walked up to her, and he asked her if something was wrong. I saw her wipe her tears, and she looked back. She was beyond beautiful. She smiled, and wiped some more of her tears. Then she thanked him and answered in Spanish. I'm fine. Can you sit here with me?" My brother nodded and sat down. There was no way he can turn down an invitation from a beautiful woman. He sat down, and I sat down on the other side of her. It was raining and I knew she must have been cold, so I took off my jacket and placed it onto her shoulders. She kissed me on the cheek and rubbed my hair. I smiled, until I noticed how wet her skin was. She was wet to the bone. It wasn't caused by the rain, I could easily tell. It seemed like she took a dip in the lake, but that didn't seem possible. I was freezing just by sitting there. While I was thinking that, she did something that I didn't expect. Her eyes rolled backwards into her skull, and she let out a deathly wail. Her face was no longer the face of a beautiful woman. It was the face of a demon. I ran to my brother, and he yelled out to me to run to the house. He pulled out the gun and tried shooting her. He fired all of the bullets into her chest like a madman, but it didn't do anything. The woman disappeared and appeared 10 meters closer to my brother. Then she appeared right behind him. She grabbed his head and pushed her thumbs into his eyes. She mercilessly stuck her hands inside of his chest and threw him. He cried and dropped the gun as he flew. I ran for the door and got inside. I immediately locked it. Quietly, I whispered a prayer to God as I slipped down the door into a sitting position. I could hear my parents running down the stairs. They asked me what was going on, but I just ignored them. The police came and my brother's body was never found. I swear I still see the ghost of La Llorona to this day. All I can do is to tell my children to never, ever go by the river at night, and to never answer the calls of La Llorona. Doing so will cost you your life, and most likely your soul. To start this story off and give a little insight about me, I'm an 18-year-old female who grew up in Michigan and have lived in the country for as long as I can remember. On one hot summer weekend, me and a couple friends, including my boyfriend, let's call him Tony, and my older brother, let's call him Brad, decided we were going to go camping for the weekend since it was such a nice warm week. Tony's parents owned a cabin way out in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by a huge wooden area with a personal lake and no neighbors for at least 4 miles. But being stupid teenagers, we didn't really think about that. All we were ready for was to party like any normal teens would. Well, after being there for about 2 hours, our fun had started. Tony's friends had brought a ton of alcohol and weed to last us for the weekend so we wouldn't be bored since we had no service and only movies to watch. When it was roughly 12 a.m. and was pitch black, we had a huge bonfire going. It was a total of 6 people, including me and Tony. As we talked and laughed about the upcoming events in our lives, we were so distracted that we didn't even notice my brother had literally frozen his eyes onto one section of the woods. Mind you, we were all intoxicated and high at the time. Eventually our talking ceased when Tony realized his friend and my brother had an emotionless expression. "Hey dude, you alright?" he asked Brad. Silence. Brad didn't reply or even make any movements that would indicate he heard him. After that, I started to get a little scared, as were the other 2 girls. It took a lot for my brother to act that way. Eventually, I was the first person to catch on that he was excessively staring into a certain spot into the woods. I turned my head and followed his gaze the best I could, and when I finally caught on to what he was staring at, my heart dropped. There, right fucking there, was at first a dog. At least that's what I thought. It was some person's dog that wandered off, but then my brain kicked in, and I realized there wasn't any neighbors for miles, so how could there be a dog? My mind started to race while Tony still tried to get Brad to speak or even move. In one motion, this thing stood up tall, and when I say tall, I mean fucking gigantic. It had to be at least 6 feet tall. Everyone's seen it then. How could you not? The other 2 girls and the other boy gasped as they finally saw why my brother was still as a stick. No one moved for what seemed like hours. Tony was the first to talk. No tail, he mumbled. No one heard what he said, but Brad. And I swear to you, when I saw his eyes wide and as big as pan saucers, that freaked me out immediately. "What did you say?" one of the girls asked. "It has no fucking tail," he hissed at her. My heartbeat stopped. He was right. There was no tail on this thing. Suddenly, my clouded alcohol mind cleared up in a fraction of a second when I finally realized what this thing was. Now I understand why my brother was basically shitting his pants. This thing was a Skinwalker. My instincts kicked in right there and then, but before I could nope the fuck out of there, this thing let off a terrible stench, like rotting meat before screaming inhumane-like. The sound was enough to scare the fuck out of everyone. My brother was the first out of his chair, and started shouting native words to the creature. That's when I told everyone to get the fuck inside. No one questioned me when they seen how dead serious I was, especially Tony. He's never seen me so scared, so he knew it was a bad situation. We all hightailed it into the cabin with my brother in tow, still shouting native words at the creature, which seemed to keep it at bay while it gave us enough time to get inside. He slammed and locked the door before turning all the lights off, and grabbing a special ash from the kitchen counter, and started throwing it at every window and door while chanting. Of course he had everyone freaked out, and basically everyone was in tears at that moment. After he was done, no one said a word for a long time, all of us still in shock. He grabbed our dad's pistol and had it posted by him for hours. He was entirely too shaken up to even question what happened. We must have fallen asleep eventually, because I woke up to my brother packing all of our stuff into 2 cars early in the morning. I understand why. We had a native family. We knew what we were dealing with, and we knew it could come back and maybe not alone next time. Before we left, I did a blessing on the cabin and spoke a few calming words to the still very freaked out girls. We left as soon as everything was packed up. To this day, we still haven't explained exactly to our friends what happened that night, and they might never bother to ask us either. If you enjoyed this video, please comment. Any feedback is totally welcome, and please give it a like or dislike. The choice is in your hands. And last but not least, always remember, I am the words that keeps the birds humming. Join me.